said he was going to give me an easy job and move me to the Mississippi Valley Division so I could rest, and then we have two hurricanes and 5 floods, and I won't go on to that. But prior to taking command of a division, what I try to do is read the history of where we came from. And so I read the history on the Mississippi River, a lot of the documents that we're talking about. I've read Rising Tide. John Barry, I'm not sure if he's here today. He usually attends these things. Certainly have read Lanterns on the Levees. River we have Rot, which has to do about navigation systems in the northern part and the upper part of the Mississippi. Upon Their Shoulders, which is a history of the Mississippi River Commission. And so while I was reading the history, it's like, okay, so what else am I supposed to do as I look at the history of the Mississippi River? What's the future look like? And as I traveled around the Mississippi River, I would go in the upper part of the Miss, and the people look at the upper part of the Mississippi as a separate entity. I look at the Middle Miss. You go into St. Louis, and it's the Middle Miss, and you know, we don't care too much about those guys in the upper and the lower. And then, of course, you go into the lower part of the Mississippi, and they just don't recognize that it's connected from one area to another. And so I was trying to figure out how do we define what the future ought to be in all of these sub watersheds. And so what I started asking folks about is, well, let me put a slide number 34 up, please. And I think Mr. Tripp and probably a few others had showed this as well. When I look at the Mississippi River, the watershed, it's very much as you see on this slide. It's 41%, I believe Cindy, Regional Director of Fish and Wildlife Service, mentioned that 41% of the United States puts water into the Mississippi, into the watershed. 31 states touch the Mississippi River watershed. It's not only the Mississippi River, it's the Ohio, it's the Missouri, and so what you see there is a much larger watershed than what people have in their mind. And so what I was looking for is, what's that document that defines the future of the 3rd largest watershed in the world? As you put these together, that's the 3rd largest watershed in the world. And our nation doesn't have a vision for what we should be looking at on the 3rd largest watershed in the world. And so as I was looking for that future document, I couldn't find one. Now, being a public engineer, I know that it takes 50 years sometimes to get things going. And most of that has to do with science. I'm an engineer, so you guys, most of it has to do with science and policy. But how do we put together a vision that's, next slide please, 35, a 200-year vision? And the reason why I looked at a 200-year vision, because you're going to have to figure out what you want and then build back in 50-year increments on what the future should look like. And you can see on this slide, I have it on the right-hand side, English that I can talk to my mom about, and on the left-hand side, my mom could understand that, and on the right-hand side is Washington, D.C. speak. So I can hit on both sides, but it says the same thing, that we should have an intergenerational commitment that our people should enjoy a quality of life unmatched in the world. We should lead secure lives along all the rivers and the tributaries. We should enjoy fresh air, fauna, and the surrounding areas. I'll let you read the rest of that. And so we're taking that vision around from the Mississippi River Commission. I'm the president designee of that Mississippi River Commission. We're driving that around and seeing if we can get people to rally around the 3rd largest watershed in the world. And that's why people who have heard my pitch before, I can't control myself in talking about the 3rd largest watershed in the world. And how does that connect with the future and what we should be looking at? And I think that's where we go to. I've got 8 minutes. All right, I'm stopping.
It's all right. No. We'll get back to it because there's a lot of questions. Do you want to answer? Let me begin with you about the question that was raised earlier about what to do with should we cut off the Mississippi? And did you see that slide that was put up earlier today? One of the solutions to the flooding and restoration was to just chop off the Mississippi at the bottom and redirect it to a different spot. Do you have any, are you allowed to say anything about that?
Well, I would say part of the requirement of the Mississippi River Commission that started in 1879 was to work navigation on the Mississippi. Right after that, the 28 flood, there was a requirement to put in a flood damage reduction system since 1928 on forward. So one of my missions in the Mississippi River Commission is to maintain navigability and flood risk reduction. We have our nation has invested about $13 billion into that navigation system and the flood risk reduction system at about $300 million a piece. Can we look at different ways of navigation? Sure we can. That's not new. And I think as the doctor mentioned, there's a lot of things that just kind of circulate around. It's about 30 years ago, people were saying, well, why don't we just take a little bit past New Orleans and we'll take a hard left and a hard right on the navigation piece. We can do that if that's what people want. As an engineer, I can pretty much build whatever you scientists say I can build.
Yeah. Let me go to some questions from the audience because they actually mirror a lot of mine. And this one is, the views of the future presented do not take into account changes in technology. They all look at the future based on today's technology. How will technological innovations affect the future of the Gulf? Think of robots, genetically modified species, breakthrough energy solutions, yeah, like fusion, but also simple things like better skimmers, planning for, if we're going to be living with oil in the Gulf, shouldn't we be planning that a spill is going to happen? We should have better technology to clean it up or to know what the Gulf looked like before it ever happened.
Well, that's right. Bill Riley, as was stated earlier, one of our co-chairs, was administrator of EPA during the Exxon Valdez. And he commented when he got back, he had this duty to do, it like he had been asleep for 20 years, that very little change in the technology to fight and control oil spills. So we have recommendations about doing that. The other thing, I think, though, and then there are many examples, not only in terms of the oil and gas drilling technology that's developed, and be able to drill and work in deep water, but everyone saw all of these pictures taken by these ROVs, these robots down there. That was actually technology that was homegrown, developed right there in the Gulf of Mexico, the highest technology now exported around the world. But the other, I think, when we think about the technology, we shouldn't always think about the hard technology, mechanical, electrical technology, because I think if anything, we've learned we've got to use natural technology and have natural systems do a lot of the work to restore and sustain this environment. So I think we have a lot to learn about the forces of nature and how we manage them and how we let them build things and create things that last.
What did you not hear today in all the talks that you would like to, I'll ask this of all the panels, that you would like to have heard talked about today? What was not talked about enough? Or, I mean, we've been speaking for hours here. Just about everything has been covered, but I'll just say one of the recurring themes, and this was talked about at the last panel and the panel before, is the science-based necessity for getting the science right in the Gulf. Why did we not have any information about what the Gulf even looks like before we went in there?
I'll take a first shot at this. The Gulf has been a very productive and a fairly resilient system for decades. So people in general didn't worry about it. I mean, every year it seemed to produce all the same oil, all the same gas, all the same seafood, all the same jobs, all the same everything, all the same wetlands. And it hasn't been until the Gulf now has been challenged. It's been challenged by a series of very severe hurricanes and now an oil spill. And primarily Katrina and this oil spill have focused the attention of the nation onto the Gulf of Mexico and away from the last mudslide in California or the last wildfire somewhere. I mean, we've had two very large disasters in a relatively short period of time in the Gulf of Mexico region, and that has brought a lot of attention to the region, as it should. People in the region have been trying for decades to get basically Congress to pay more attention to the Gulf and to provide more funds to the Gulf region to study and to learn more about the Gulf.
One of the suggestions of somebody in the audience says, shouldn't we make it a requirement of the industry to fund these baseline studies prior to development of new offshore areas?
Yes, indeed, that's one of the recommendations
Right.
as part of the management plan that we said the industry should support rather than the general taxpayer. That would include support for the environmental studies program, which, by the way, had dwindled on a non-inflation adjusted basis down to a fifth of what it was 15 years ago. And the reason it dwindled is that the demand for the science, which was primarily from the areas, the frontier areas where people were concerned about these new risks, dwindled. There was not the demand for it in the Gulf of Mexico. Now I think we have an opportunity to learn the hard way by investing in that science to help us understand this important operating environment.
General Walsh?
I guess what I didn't hear concrete enough is what is the vision of the Gulf Coast in 100 years? If we knew what that was, then I think we could design the science on how to work those particular items. There was a question I think was up here. Can we get it done? And the answer was yes, of course. But what is it? Is what I'm looking for. And when we define what it is, we do a very good job at it. I mean, when we put the Transcontinental Railroad together during the Civil War, it took 6 years. When President Kennedy said go to the moon, we knew what the science was, and we can go to the moon. When the Mississippi River Commission was given the requirement to put flood damage reduction system together, we've done that. When Congress said to build a hurricane storm damage risk reduction system around the city of New Orleans, they gave the Corps $15 billion. And in another 132 days, we'll bring that city to the first time above a 100-year level of surge protection. So when you know where you want to go, you can help get there. And so what I didn't hear is what it is.
There's no it in it. So to paraphrase someone else a while back. Yes, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to actually echo that same frustration. You know, I do think that we're at a really pivotal time now, though, and you know, with the creation of the Gulf of Mexico Restoration Task Force, through work with those of us who are there in the region and are familiar with the programs and plans that have been developed, hopefully we'll craft that vision and we'll be able to find exactly what it is.
And do we have a plan? We have the money. We talked about there is potential money. And General Walsh has very well put the issue, what the it is, even scientifically speaking. If we want to study the Gulf, is there a plan of what you would study in the Gulf and go step A, B, C, D, and collect this information for what we need? Does a plan like that exist to be funded? Let me ask Dr. Walker first.
Well, for the first time now, through the current administration has created a National Ocean Partnership that's creating, again, a National Ocean Council. And that council will work with the various regional ocean partnerships around the country, including the Gulf Alliance and the three on the Atlantic, the Pacific coast, and the four on the Atlantic coast, to do just that, to develop a long-range, maybe 100-year vision for the future of that particular great water body. So we have finally headed down that path, and that's something that we didn't hear today, but we're going in the right direction, I do think, at this point.
Don, you agree?
Yeah, I just want to reflect on this. You asked a question about the science, and you can talk about the science generally for the Gulf of Mexico. But if we focus for the moment on what the last panel talked about, the restoration challenge, everyone who makes a recommendation says that this restoration should be science-based, science-informed, science-supported. But that's easy to say, harder to do. Case in point, the Congress authorized